Captain Jiwan stood in the observation deck of the human starship Indomitable, watching the massive space station grow larger on the view screen. Concordia Prime was the largest structure she had ever seen. The station spun slowly in the darkness of space, its lights creating a ring of stars against the black void. Hundreds of alien ships surrounded it, each one belonging to a different species from across the galaxy. She adjusted her uniform and checked her appearance one last time. Today was important. Today, the Galactic Coalition would decide the fate of the frontier sectors, and humanity would finally have a voice in galactic politics. At least that was what she hoped. "Captain, we're being hailed by station control," Lieutenant Doyen said from his position at the tactical console. He was a thin man with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Jiwan had served with him for 5 years and she trusted his judgment completely. "Put them through," Jiwan replied. A mechanical voice filled the bridge. "Human vessel Indomitable, you are cleared for docking at Bay 17. Please maintain current speed and heading. Support vessels are assigned to the outer ring only." Jiwan felt her jaw tighten. Support vessels. That was what the aliens called human ships. Not warships. Not even proper military vessels. Just support. The Indomitable moved through the docking procedures smoothly. Jiwan watched as massive alien battleships passed by their ship. The Viscari Empire's vessels were dark and angular, covered in armor plating that looked thick enough to stop anything. The Thrain Collective sent ships that looked like giant insects, their hulls covered in strange organic material. The Neltorian Federation's ships were spherical and smooth, filled with water for their aquatic crews. Compared to them, the Indomitable looked small and fragile. Human ships were built for speed and efficiency, not for showing off power. But Jiwan knew that looking weak and being weak were two different things. She gathered her senior officers for the meeting. Lieutenant Doyen would come as her tactical advisor. Sergeant Nari, the leader of their Marine detachment, would represent their ground forces. Nari was a short woman with scars on her hands from years of combat training. She had fought in the Martian Rebellion and carried herself with the confidence of someone who had seen real war. "Remember," Jiwan told them as they prepared to leave the ship, "we're representing all of humanity today. These aliens think we're primitive. They think we're weak because we joined the coalition only 15 years ago. Let them think that. But we know the truth." "What truth is that, Captain?" Sergeant Nari asked with a slight smile. "That humanity didn't reach the stars by being soft," Jiwan replied. The main council chamber was enormous. Representatives from dozens of alien species filled the room, each one sitting in specialized seating designed for their unique biology. The Viscari delegates were massive reptilian creatures, easily 3 meters tall, with scales that glinted like metal. The Thrain representatives looked like oversized mantises, their compound eyes reflecting the chamber's lights. The Neltorians sat in tanks of water, speaking through translation devices. Ambassador Hyunwoo was already there, sitting in the human delegation area. He was an older man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had spent the last 10 years trying to make the other species take humanity seriously. Jiwan could see the frustration on his face. "Captain Jiwan, thank you for coming," Hyunwoo said quietly. "I need military personnel here for this meeting. Things are about to get difficult." The council session began. A Vescari commander named Krell stepped forward. He was enormous, even by Vescari standards, and wore armor decorated with marks of military achievement. His voice boomed through the chamber. "The Viscari Empire has been patient long enough," Krell announced. "The frontier sectors contain resources that belong to us by right of conquest. We discovered them. We claimed them. The coalition has no authority to take what is ours. We give you one final choice. Surrender the frontier sectors or face the consequences." The chamber erupted in noise. Multiple species began arguing at once. The Thrain Hive commander clicked her mandibles in anger. The Neltorian Fleet Admiral's translation device crackled with aggressive words. "This is an act of war," the Thrain representative declared. "The coalition will not surrender to threats." "Then the coalition will learn what war means," Krell replied. "We will send our fleets. We will take what is ours, and anyone who stands in our way will be destroyed." The coalition council leader, a Neltorian named Qualseth, raised his tentacles for silence. "We will send a peacekeeping force. All member species will contribute ships and personnel." Ambassador Hyunwoo stood up. "The human delegation requests that our forces be included in the main fleet. We have experienced military personnel and capable ships." The chamber went silent for a moment. Then, to Jiwon's shock, several alien species began making sounds that their translation devices labeled as laughter. War Commander Krell looked directly at the human delegation. His eyes were cold and filled with contempt. Humans? In the main fleet? Your species barely survived your own planet's wars. You are soft-skinned primitives who only learned to travel between stars a few generations ago. What could you possibly contribute to a real military operation? The Thrain representative added her own comment. Humans have no natural armor, no venom, no enhanced strength. They are fragile creatures who would break in real combat. A Neltorian admiral spoke next. Human ships are primitive. Their weapons are outdated. Their tactics are unproven in galactic warfare. We cannot risk the mission by including untested forces in critical positions. Jiwon felt her hands clench into fists. Beside her, Sergeant Nari's face had gone completely blank, the expression of someone forcing herself to stay calm. Lieutenant Doyen stared straight ahead, his jaw tight. Ambassador Hyunwoo tried again. We may be new to galactic society, but humanity has extensive military experience. We have developed tactics and strategies over thousands of years of warfare. We can contribute more than you think. You will contribute, Qualseth said dismissively. Human forces will handle logistics and medical support. You will stay in the rear areas away from combat. This is the Coalition's decision. The meeting continued, but Jiwon barely heard the rest of it. Her mind was racing with anger and frustration. They were being dismissed, treated like children who couldn't be trusted with real responsibility. Later, back on the Indomitable, Jiwon met with her officers in the briefing room. The orders had come through officially. The human fleet would take position at the rear of the Coalition formation. They would coordinate supply lines and provide medical support. Nothing more. This is insulting, Sergeant Nari said flatly. They're treating us like we're not real soldiers. They're treating us exactly like what they think we are, Lieutenant Doyen replied. Weak, primitive, harmless. Jiwon looked at both of them. And maybe that's our advantage. They underestimate us. They don't know what humans are capable of. They've never faced an enemy like us before. What do you mean, Captain? Nari asked. The Veskari have never lost a war, Jiwon explained. They win through overwhelming force. The Thrain win through numbers. The Neltorians win through superior technology. They all fight the same way, just with different methods. But humans, we learn to fight by facing enemies stronger, faster, and more numerous than ourselves. We learned to win when we should have lost. That's what makes us different. Doyen nodded slowly. They think physical strength wins wars. But we know better, Jiwon finished. Wars are won by those who refuse to quit, by those who adapt, by those who turn every disadvantage into an advantage. She looked out at the stars through the briefing room window. Somewhere out there, the Veskari Empire was preparing for war. They believed they would win easily. They believed the Coalition was weak, especially the humans. Let them believe we're weak, Jiwon said quietly. When the time comes, we'll show them what humanity really is. The Coalition fleet assembled in the frontier sectors 3 days later. Captain Jiwon watched the formation take shape on her tactical display. Over 300 ships from a dozen different species filled the space around the resource-rich star systems. The Veskari Empire had threatened war, and the Coalition had answered with force. But not all force was equal. The front line belonged to the Thrain Collective and the Neltorian Federation. Their massive battleships formed a wall of armor and weapons, ready to meet any attack. Behind them, cruisers and destroyers from smaller species provided support. And far in the rear, almost an hour away at full burn, sat the human vessels. 15 ships, Lieutenant Doyen said, looking at the display. That's humanity's entire contribution to a fleet of 300. And we're positioned so far back that we might as well be in a different star system. Those are our orders, Jiwon replied, though her voice was tight with frustration. We coordinate supplies. We provide medical support. We stay out of the way. Sergeant Nari stood near the back of the bridge, her arms crossed. My Marines didn't train for years just to sit on a ship and watch others fight. Before Jiwon could respond, alarms began blaring across the bridge. Red lights flashed on every console. Contact, Doyen shouted. Multiple vessels dropping out of faster-than-light travel. It's the Veskari fleet, Captain. And it's huge. The tactical display updated, and Jiwon felt her heart sink. Hundreds of Veskari ships appeared on the screen, far more than intelligence had predicted. War Commander Krell hadn't come to negotiate. He had come to crush the Coalition. The Veskari attack began immediately. Their ships didn't waste time with warnings or communications. They simply opened fire with everything they had. Massive energy beams crossed the darkness of space, slamming into Coalition shields. Missiles streaked through the void by the thousands. The Thrain vessels responded with their swarm tactics, launching clouds of small fighter craft to overwhelm enemy defenses. The Neltorian ships activated their advanced shield systems and returned fire with precise, calculated shots. The battle became a storm of light and destruction. Jiwan watched helplessly from the rear position. "Get me a communication line to Fleet Admiral Qualseth," she ordered. "Captain, the front line is taking heavy casualties," Doyen reported. "The Veskari have broken through the first wave of Thrain fighters. 3 Neltorian battleships have lost shield integrity." The communication line crackled to life. "All support vessels, this is Fleet Admiral Qualseth. Maintain your positions. Do not, I repeat, do not advance into combat range. Admiral, request permission to assist the front line," Jiwan said quickly. "Denied. Captain Jiwan. Human vessels are to remain in support positions. That is a direct order." The line went dead. Jiwan turned back to the tactical display. The battle was only 20 minutes old, and the Coalition was already losing. The Veskari ships were too strong, too heavily armed. They absorbed damage that would destroy other vessels and kept fighting. "Captain," Doyen said quietly, "the Thrain have lost 40% of their fighter wings. The Neltorians are falling back to regroup. If this continues, the front line will collapse within 2 hours." A new transmission came through, broadcast on all channels. War Commander Krell's voice filled the bridge, full of confidence and contempt. "This is what happens when the weak pretend to be strong. Your Coalition is breaking apart like glass. Surrender now or I will destroy every single one of your ships. The frontier sectors belong to the Veskari Empire, and nothing you can do will change that." Jiwan watched as another Coalition ship exploded on her display. The crew of that ship, dozens of living beings gone in an instant. And there would be more. Many more unless something changed. "Captain Jiwan," came another transmission. This time it was Ambassador Hyunwoo, calling from Concordia Prime. "I'm monitoring the battle. It's worse than we feared." "I know," Jiwan replied, "and we've been ordered to stay back and watch." "Sometimes orders are wrong," Hyunwoo said carefully. "I can't officially tell you to disobey a direct command from the Coalition, but I can tell you that humanity didn't survive this long by following rules that would get us killed." The transmission ended, leaving Jiwan alone with her decision. She looked around her bridge at the officers and crew who had served with her for years. These were people she trusted with her life. People who had trained for exactly this kind of situation. "Lieutenant Doyen," she said. "Tactical analysis. Can we make a difference if we engage?" Doyen pulled up data on his console, his fingers moving quickly. "The Veskari are using standard heavy assault tactics, overwhelming firepower, straight-ahead attacks relying on superior armor and weapons. It's effective against the Coalition because everyone is fighting the same way, just trying to match strength against strength." "And if we don't fight that way?" Jiwan asked. "Then we have a chance," Doyen replied. He highlighted areas on the tactical map. "The Veskari formation has weaknesses. They're overconfident. They expect enemies to either run away or meet them head-on. They've never faced an opponent using guerrilla tactics in space combat." Sergeant Nari stepped forward. "We've trained for asymmetric warfare. Hit and run. Strike where they're weak, make them think we're everywhere at once. That's how humanity fights when facing a stronger enemy." Jiwan made her decision. "Send a message to all human vessels on encrypted channels. Tell them we're going in. All ships prepare for combat operations. We're not following their playbook. We're going to fight our way, Captain. The Fleet Admiral will be furious." Doyen warned. "I'd rather face an angry admiral than explain to Earth why I sat back and watched the Coalition fleet get destroyed when we could have helped," Jiwan replied. "Besides, if this works, they'll forgive us. And if it doesn't work, we'll be dead and it won't matter." She activated the ship-wide communication system. "All hands, this is the captain. We've been ordered to stay in the rear. We've been told we're not strong enough to make a difference. We've been treated like children who can't be trusted in a real fight. But every person on this ship knows the truth. We're descendants of people who survived ice ages, plagues, and wars that covered our entire planet. We're the children of soldiers who never quit no matter how bad things got. Today we're going to show the galaxy what that means." The bridge crew responded with determined expressions. Fear was there in their eyes, but so was something else. Pride. purpose, the knowledge that they were about to do something important. "All ships reporting ready, Captain," Doyen announced. "We have 15 vessels ready to engage." "Then let's go," Yuan ordered. "All ships maximum burn toward the battle zone. Tactical Plan Delta 7. Doyen, I want complete communication silence once we enter sensor range. The Viscari won't know we're coming until we're already there." The Indomitable's engines roared to life, pushing the ship forward. Around them, 14 other human vessels accelerated toward the battle. They were small compared to the massive alien battleships. They were outgunned and outnumbered. By every logical measure, they had no business joining this fight. But humanity had never let logic stop them before. As the Indomitable raced toward the combat zone, Jiwan pulled up the tactical plan on her personal display. It was risky. It was dangerous. It would require perfect timing and coordination. But if it worked, the Viscari were about to learn a very important lesson. Never underestimate a species that learned to survive by fighting things bigger and stronger than themselves. ETA to engagement range. 10 minutes, Doyen reported. "Captain, once we commit to this, there's no turning back." G1 smiled grimly. "Humanity never turns back. We only move forward. Even if we have to go through hell to get there." The human fleet disappeared from the Coalition's sensors, going dark as they entered combat range. Somewhere ahead, the Vescari fleet continued their assault, confident in their overwhelming victory. They had no idea what was coming for them. The battle was about to change in ways no one expected. The Vescari War Commander Krell watched the Coalition fleet break apart before his eyes. His ships had destroyed 30 Coalition vessels in the first hour, and the survivors were in chaos. The Thrain fighters scattered like insects. The Neltorian battleships retreated behind failing shields. It was almost too easy. "Commander, we're detecting movement in the rear sectors," one of his officers reported. "Multiple small vessels approaching our position." Krell barely glanced at the tactical display. "Support ships running away, probably. Ignore them. Focus all fire on the Coalition battleships." He would regret those words for the rest of his life. Captain Jiwan's voice was calm as she gave orders on the Indomitable's bridge. "All ships maintain radio silence. Execute Tactical Plan Delta 7 on my mark. Remember, we're not here to trade shots with them. We're here to make them bleed." The human fleet split into 3 groups, each containing 5 ships. They moved through space like ghosts, their systems running cold to avoid detection. The Viscari sensors were designed to track large, powerful vessels that broadcast constantly. Human ships, running silent with minimal emissions, might as well have been invisible. Lieutenant Doyen coordinated the attack from his tactical station. Target packages assigned. Primary targets are the Vescari supply ships and communication arrays. Secondary targets are propulsion systems on their heavy cruisers. "Weapons free in 30 seconds, Jawan said. Make every shot count." The first wave of human missiles launched from cold tubes, making no exhaust signature, no heat bloom. They crossed the distance to their targets in silence. The Vescari didn't see them coming until the missiles were already hitting their shields. Explosions rippled across 3 Vescari supply ships. 2 of them lost power completely, drifting helplessly in space. The third survived but was crippled, unable to provide support to the combat fleet. What was that? Krell roared on the Vescari command channel. Where did those missiles come from? Before his crew could answer, the second wave hit. Human fighter craft, tiny compared to the massive Vescari vessels, streaked through the battle zone. They didn't fly in formation like the Thrain fighters. They moved independently, each pilot making their own decisions, adapting to changing situations. Pilot Chae-Young led her squadron with precision. She had trained for 6 years, learning everything Earth's military could teach about combat flying. The Vescari ships were huge and powerful, but they were also slow. She aimed for the engine clusters on a Vescari cruiser, areas where armor was thinner to allow for heat dispersal. Her missiles struck home. The cruiser's engines sputtered and died. The massive ship began drifting, unable to maneuver. It was now a target, not a threat. "This is impossible," Krell said, watching his tactical display light up with damage reports. "They're support ships. They shouldn't even be armed for combat." His second-in-command spoke up nervously. "Sir, these aren't normal tactics. They're targeting our weak points. They're avoiding direct confrontation. This is guerrilla warfare." Krell had heard of such tactics but never experienced them. The Vescari Empire fought honorably, with power against power. These humans fought like cowards, striking from shadows and running before his forces could respond. But cowardly or not, it was working. Commander Taeyang's destroyer, the Resolute, led the second human group in a maneuver that should have been suicide. They burned straight toward a Viscari battleship at full speed, directly into its firing arc. The battleship's weapons tracked them, preparing to destroy the small vessel. At the last moment, the Resolute released a spread of kinetic kill vehicles and banked hard to the side. The battleship's gunners tried to follow, but human ships could change direction faster than Viscari targeting systems could adjust. The kinetic weapons, simple chunks of dense metal accelerated to incredible speeds, slammed into the battleship's forward sections. The armor held, but the impact sensors lit up across the Viscari ship. Alarms blared. Crew members were thrown from their stations. The battleship's captain had never experienced anything like it. Human weapons weren't supposed to be this effective. On the Indomitable, Sergeant Nari watched the battle unfold while preparing her own mission. A coalition ship, a Thrain vessel, had been heavily damaged and was drifting near the Viscari lines. Viscari boarding parties were moving to capture it. "Captain, request permission to launch rescue operation," Nari said. "Granted," Jiwon replied, "but make it quick. We can't protect you out there for long." Nari gathered her team of 30 Marines. They wore combat armor designed for zero-gravity fighting, equipped with magnetic boots and maneuvering jets. Private Minjae checked his weapons nervously. This was his first real combat mission. "Stay close to me," Nari told him. "Remember your training. Trust your squad. We go in, get the survivors, and get out. Simple." Nothing about combat was ever simple, but Minjae nodded anyway. The Marine team launched from the Indomitable in small boarding pods, streaking across space toward the damaged Thrain ship. They reached it minutes before the Viscari boarding party arrived. Nari led her team through the breached hull, moving carefully in the zero-gravity. Inside, they found 12 Thrain survivors, injured and trapped. The Thrain warriors looked at the humans with surprise. They had never seen humans fight before. "Can you walk?" Nari asked through her translation device. "We can move," the Thrain leader replied. "But the Viscari are coming. You should leave us. Save yourselves." "Humanity doesn't leave people behind," Nari said simply. "Marines, defensive positions. We hold here until the evacuation pods arrive." The Vescari boarding party breached the hull 5 minutes later. 20 Vescari warriors, each one twice the size of a human, wearing heavy armor and carrying weapons that could punch through bulkheads. They expected to find injured Thrain and an empty ship. Instead, they found human Marines waiting for them. The fight was brutal and close. The Viscari were stronger, but the humans fought with a precision that came from training in Earth's most dangerous environments. Nari's team used the ship's structure against their enemies, collapsing sections to separate the Viscari, using doorways as choke points. Private Minjae found himself face-to-face with a Viscari warrior. The alien was massive, its scaled hands reaching for him. Minjae's training took over. He didn't try to fight strength with strength. Instead, he used his maneuvering jets to dodge sideways, then fired 3 shots at the Viscari's knee joint, where armor segments met. The warrior fell and Minjae kept moving. "Evacuating now," Nari shouted. Her team pulled back, carrying the Thrain survivors with them. They reached their pods and launched, leaving the Viscari warriors frustrated and confused in the empty ship. Back on the Indomitable, Jiwon received reports from all 3 human groups. The tactical plan was working better than expected. Human ships had disabled or destroyed 15 Viscari vessels without losing a single ship of their own. But more importantly, they had changed the entire dynamic of the battle. Lieutenant Doyen showed her the updated tactical display. "Captain, the coalition forces are rallying. The Thrain Hive commander is requesting to coordinate with our forces. The Neltorians want our tactical data. They're watching what we're doing and adapting their own strategies." Jiwon smiled. "Good. Show them what we learned from thousands of years of fighting on Earth. War isn't about being the strongest. It's about being the smartest." On his command ship, War Commander Krell stared at his tactical display in growing anger and disbelief. His fleet was still larger. His ships were still more powerful. But somehow these insignificant humans had turned his certain victory into a real fight. "All ships focus fire on the human vessels," he ordered. "I want them destroyed now." But the human ships refused to stay still. They scattered, regrouped, and struck from new angles. Every time Vescari forces moved to engage them, The humans were already somewhere else. It was like fighting smoke. Krell realized something that made his blood run cold. These humans weren't just surviving against superior force. They were thriving in it. This was how they fought. This was what they were good at. For the first time in his military career, War Commander Krell felt something he had never experienced before in battle. Doubt. 6 hours into the battle, the situation had changed completely. The Veskari fleet was no longer advancing. Instead, they had formed a defensive circle, trying to protect their remaining support vessels and damaged ships. The coalition forces, which had been on the edge of collapse, were now pressing the attack with renewed confidence, and at the center of this change were 15 human ships and 300 soldiers. Ambassador Hyunwoo sat in the communication center on Concordia Prime, watching the battle data stream in. He had spent 10 years trying to make the galaxy respect humanity. In 6 hours, Captain Ji-won and her fleet had accomplished what a decade of diplomacy could not. He activated the broadcast system, sending his message to the entire coalition fleet and to every major government in the galaxy. To all who can hear, this, Hyunwoo began, I want to explain something about humanity that you clearly didn't understand. We are not a strong species. We don't have thick armor like the Veskari. We don't have the numbers of the Thrain. We don't have advanced technology like the Neltorians. But we have something else. We survived ice ages that killed most life on our planet. We survived diseases that should have destroyed our entire species. We fought wars against each other for thousands of years, learning and adapting with every conflict. Every human alive today is descended from survivors. That's what we are. That's what we've always been. Survivors who refuse to quit no matter the odds. The message broadcast across all channels. In the coalition fleet, alien crews listened. On Veskari ships, warriors heard words that made them reconsider their enemies. And on human vessels, crews felt pride swell in their chests. Captain Ji-won received an incoming communication request. To her surprise, it came from the Thrain Hive Commander herself, the leader of the entire Thrain combat fleet. Captain Ji-won. The Thrain Commander said, My forces have been watching your tactics. We request human tactical advisors to coordinate future strikes. If you agree, we will follow your strategic guidance. Ji-won kept her surprise from showing. The Thrain Collective had thousands of ships and millions of warriors. They were asking a human captain for advice. We'll share everything we know, Ji-won replied. Send your tactical data to Lieutenant Doyen. We'll coordinate a joint operation. Similar requests came from other coalition vessels. Everyone wanted to know how the humans were fighting so effectively. Lieutenant Doyen found himself coordinating with a dozen different species, explaining concepts that seemed obvious to humans, but revolutionary to aliens who had never experienced this type of warfare. You have to think like your enemy, Doyen explained over an open channel. The Veskari expect you to fight with honor, to meet them face to face. So don't. Hit their supply lines. Target their communication systems. Make them fight in ways they're not comfortable with. Force them to adapt. And while they're adapting, you hit them again. The coalition fleet began to change its tactics. Ships that had been retreating now struck at Veskari weak points. The Thrain fighters stopped trying to overwhelm enemy defenses and instead focused on precision strikes against critical systems. The Neltorians used their superior sensors to identify targets for human missile strikes. It was working. The Veskari formation was falling apart. On the Indomitable, Corporal Junho worked frantically in the engineering section. He had taken coalition, shield technology, and human missile designs and created something new. The modified missiles could phase through Veskari shields for just a split second before detonating, not long enough to be detected, but long enough to bypass the shields entirely. Captain, weapons modification complete, Junho reported. But I've only made 12 of them. We need to make them count. We will, Ji-won promised. She had identified the key target hours ago. The Veskari command ship, the vessel where War Commander Krell directed the entire battle. It was the largest, most heavily armed and armored ship in the Veskari fleet. Destroying it was impossible. But they didn't need to destroy it, they just needed to get inside. Sergeant Nari assembled her team again. This time, she had 60 Marines, 30 from the Indomitable and 30 more from other human vessels. They gathered in the launch bay, checking their equipment one final time. Private Minjay stood among them, no longer the nervous rookie he had been at the start of the battle. He had survived his first combat. He had saved his squad. He had proven himself. But this mission was different. This mission was going to be dangerous in ways nothing else had been. "Listen up," Nari said to the assembled Marines. "We're going to board the Veskari command ship, not to destroy it, to capture it. We take control of their command center, and this battle is over. It's going to be the hardest fight any of us have ever faced. Veskari warriors on their own ship protecting their commander. They won't run. They won't surrender. We're going to have to go through them." She looked at each face, seeing fear but also determination. "Can we do this?" someone asked. "Yes," Nari said simply. "Because we're human, and humans do impossible things when they have to." The plan was insane. An abandoned mining station drifted near the battle zone, destroyed years ago and forgotten. The human Marines would launch from there, using the station as cover to approach the Veskari command ship undetected. 6 human ships would create a distraction, drawing the Veskari defenses to one side of their formation. In that moment of confusion, the Marines would strike. Captain Jiwan coordinated the entire operation from the Indomitable. She watched as her ships moved into position, as the Marines launched silently from the mining station, as everything came together with perfect timing. "Distraction team, execute now," she ordered. 6 human vessels appeared on Veskari sensors simultaneously, firing missiles and broadcasting on all frequencies. The Veskari fleet reacted exactly as predicted, turning their attention to this new threat. No one noticed the small boarding pods crossing the darkness toward the command ship. The Marines breached the hull using cutting torches that sliced through Veskari armor like paper. They poured into the ship, moving through corridors built for creatures twice their size. Alarms began blaring almost immediately. The Veskari knew they had been boarded. Sergeant Nari led her team through the ship with brutal efficiency. They didn't try to fight every Veskari warrior they encountered. Instead, they used speed and surprise. They sealed bulkheads behind them, cutting off pursuit. They used the ship's own systems against the crew, venting atmosphere in some sections, disabling lights in others. Private Minjay found himself in a firefight at a corridor junction. Veskari warriors in full armor charged toward his position. He remembered his training, remembered what Sergeant Nari had taught him. He didn't panic. He didn't freeze. He found cover, identified weak points, and fired with precision. The Marines fought their way deeper into the ship. They took casualties. 5 Marines fell in the first 10 minutes. 8 more were injured. But they kept moving forward, always forward, because that was what humans did. Dr. Soyan worked in the Indomitable's medical bay, treating wounded from all species. Coalition soldiers who had been declared beyond help by their own medical staff were brought to the human ship. Soyan used techniques developed from centuries of human warfare, where doctors learned to save soldiers even from horrific injuries. A Thrain warrior with 3 severed limbs was stabilized. An Eltorian pilot with severe burns was saved. Word spread through the Coalition fleet that human doctors could perform miracles. More wounded were brought to human medical bays. On the Veskari command ship, Sergeant Nari's team reached the command center. The massive doors were sealed and reinforced. 20 Veskari elite guards waited inside, protecting their commander. "Junho's special missiles," Nari said into her communication device. "We need them now." Captain Jiwan fired the modified missiles herself. They streaked through space, phased through the command ship's shields, and struck precisely where Nari had marked. The explosions rocked the ship. The command center's reinforced doors cracked. "Breach!" Nari shouted. The Marines poured through. The fight inside was savage. Veskari elite guards were the best warriors their empire had to offer. But they had never faced human Marines who had trained in close-quarters combat since they were teenagers, who had learned from veterans of Earth's bloodiest wars. The battle for the command center lasted 3 minutes. When it was over, 15 Marines were still standing. and War Commander Krell found himself looking at a human sergeant pointing a weapon at his head. "Order your fleet to stand down," Nari said calmly, "or I'll show you what happens when humans stop being nice." Krell stared at her. This tiny creature, barely half his size, had led a team through his flagship and captured his command center. It should have been impossible. "You fight without honor," Krell said. "We fight to win," Nari replied. "Now give the order." War Commander Krell looked at the human sergeant standing before him. Her armor was scorched. Blood seeped from a wound on her arm. Behind her, 30 human Marines held weapons trained on his elite guards. The command center of his flagship, the symbol of Veskari military might, had been captured by beings he had dismissed as weak primitives. Sergeant Nari kept her weapons steady, aimed directly at Krell's head. "The order, Commander. Tell your fleet to stand down." Krell's claws flexed, considering his options. He could refuse. He could fight. He could die with honor. But as he looked at these humans, he saw something in their eyes that changed his mind. They weren't afraid. They weren't uncertain. They were absolutely prepared to do whatever was necessary. These were not the soft creatures he had imagined. These were warriors forged in fire. "All Veskari vessels," Krell spoke into the communication system, his voice heavy with defeat. "Cease fire. Fall back to safe distance. The battle is over." The Veskari fleet began to withdraw. On coalition ships, tired crews watched in disbelief as their enemy retreated. The battle that should have ended in disaster had become a victory. Captain Jiwan sat in her command chair on the Indomitable, feeling exhaustion wash over her. 6 hours of constant combat. 6 hours of making life and death decisions. Her ship had taken damage. Her crew was tired. But they had done it. "Captain, we're receiving communication requests from every ship in the Coalition fleet," Lieutenant Doyen reported. "They all want to talk to you." "Later," Jiwan said. "First, get me casualty reports." "How many did we lose?" 17 dead, 43 wounded, Doyen replied quietly. "From our entire fleet. Considering what we accomplished, those numbers are remarkably low. 17 humans had died in the battle." Jiwan would remember every single name. But thousands of Coalition personnel had survived because of what humanity had done. The trade-off was terrible, but necessary. The Coalition began counting their losses. The Veskari had lost 40% of their invasion fleet, over 100 ships destroyed or crippled, thousands of warriors dead. It was the first major defeat the Veskari Empire had suffered in 200 years. And the Coalition had survived because of 15 human ships and 300 soldiers. 3 days after the battle, the Galactic Coalition Council convened an emergency session, this time when Ambassador Hyunwoo entered the chamber. The other species stood in respect. Captain Jiwan walked beside him, still wearing her combat uniform. She had refused to change it, wanting everyone to see the scorch marks and damage from the battle. The Thrain Hive commander spoke first. The Thrain Collective wishes to formally thank humanity for their actions. Without human tactical guidance, our forces would have been destroyed. We request that human military advisors be assigned to train our warriors in these new methods of combat. The Neltorian Fleet Admiral added his own words. The Neltorian Federation offers to integrate human crews into our naval command structure. We have learned that technological superiority means nothing without tactical flexibility. Species after species spoke, each one offering thanks, respect, and requests for cooperation. The aliens who had laughed at humanity just days ago now competed for human military assistance. Captain Jiwan listened to it all with a neutral expression. Finally, she was asked to speak. "The Coalition treated us as weak," Jiwan said, her voice carrying through the chamber. "You dismissed our capabilities because we don't have thick armor or natural weapons. You assumed that physical strength equals military power. You were wrong. Humanity reached the stars not because we were the strongest species on our planet. We reached the stars because we were the most stubborn. We survived by learning, adapting, and refusing to give up no matter how bad things got. That's what makes us dangerous. Not our weapons, not our ships, our mindset." She paused, looking at each species in turn. "You want human tactical advisors? You want our military cooperation? Fine, but understand this. We don't fight for glory. We don't fight for honor. We fight to win using every advantage we can find, and we never ever abandon our allies. If you want humanity's help, you'll get it. But you'll also get our way of doing things." The chamber was silent for a moment. Then, surprisingly, War Commander Krell's voice came through a communication link. He was speaking from his damaged flagship now being escorted away from Coalition space. "Captain G1," Krell said, "I underestimated your species. That was a mistake I will not make again. Your soldiers are not warriors by nature. You are warriors by necessity, and that makes you far more dangerous than those who are simply born strong. This conflict is not over. The Veskari Empire will recover. But when we meet again, we will meet as equals who respect each other. You have earned that much." The transmission ended. Jiwan felt a strange satisfaction. Respect from an enemy who had tried to destroy them meant more than praise from allies who had doubted them. The Coalition Council made several immediate decisions. Humanity would be promoted from support roles to full military status. Human tactical training would be offered to all Coalition species. Human medical techniques would be adopted across the galaxy, and the human fleet would be expanded, with Coalition resources dedicated to building more ships. 2 weeks after the battle, awards were distributed. Sergeant Nari and her Marine team received the Coalition's highest honor, the Star of Valor. They were the first humans ever to receive this award. Private Minjay stood at attention as the medal was pinned to his uniform, thinking about how scared he had been at the start of the battle. He had survived. He had fought. He had become part of something larger than himself. Lieutenant Doyen was promoted to commander and assigned to teach at the Coalition Military Academy. His first class would cover asymmetric warfare, guerrilla tactics, and the concept of turning disadvantages into advantages. Students from a dozen species signed up immediately. Commander Taeyang received command of a new battle group, composed of human ships and volunteers from other species. He would lead them in patrol missions along the frontier sectors, ensuring the Veskari didn't try another invasion. Pilot Cheong became the Coalition's chief fighter combat instructor. Pilots from species that had been flying for thousands of years came to learn from a human who had been flying for only 6. Dr. Soyon accepted the position of Coalition Surgeon General. She would oversee medical reforms across the entire galaxy, bringing human trauma care techniques to species who had never experienced such advanced medical treatment. And Captain Jiwan remained in command of the Indomitable, now designated as the flagship of the human fleet. But her crew had changed. She now had liaison officers from 3 different species, all wanting to learn how humans approached combat. 1 month after the battle, Jiwan stood in her quarters, looking at a message from Earth. The leaders of humanity wanted her to return home, to be celebrated as a hero. But she declined. Her place was here in space, making sure that humanity's voice was heard and respected. She recorded a response that would be broadcast across Earth and sent to every human colony in space. People of Earth, we were underestimated. The galaxy looked at us and saw weakness. They saw a species without natural armor, without deadly weapons built into our bodies, without the raw power of older species. They forgot to ask one important question. How did a species like us survive long enough to reach the stars? Jiwan paused, choosing her words carefully. We survived because we're adaptable. We survived because we learn from every mistake. We survived because we work together, because we refuse to abandon each other, and because we never, ever quit. The galaxy knows that now. They know it because we showed them. Not with words, not with threats, with action. She looked directly at the camera. Humanity's place in the galaxy has changed. We're no longer the new species that everyone dismisses. We're the species that other races come to when they need to win. We're the species that turned a losing battle into a victory through sheer determination and tactical innovation. We're the species that proved survival is not about being the strongest. It's about being smart enough, tough enough, and stubborn enough to outlast everything that tries to kill you. The message ended. It would be played on every news station on Earth, broadcast to every human settlement across the colonies. Children would watch it in schools. Military academies would use it in training. It would become part of human culture, a reminder of what they had achieved. On Concordia Prime, Ambassador Hyunwoo sat in his office, reading reports about humanity's new status in the galaxy. Trade agreements were being negotiated. Technology exchanges were being arranged. Human culture was suddenly fashionable among alien species who wanted to understand this strange race of survivors. He smiled. 10 years of diplomatic work had accomplished some things, but 6 hours of battle had accomplished more. That was humanity's gift and curse. They were better at proving themselves through action than through words. In the frontier sectors, the human fleet patrolled the space that had been contested. No Vescari ships approached. The Empire was licking its wounds, rebuilding its forces, and presumably learning about human warfare methods so they wouldn't be caught by surprise again. Sergeant Nari trained new Marines, teaching them the lessons learned from the battle.